Hello everyone, I welcome you all to today's lesson where we are going to be talking about the components of the system units, and this is going to be handled by your teacher Luwagga Moses. In this lesson we are going to look at all the components, majority of the components which are inside the system unit. We are going to talk about the CPU in details, RAM, ROM, hard disk, the CMOS, CPU fan, the buses, power supply, motherboard, expansion slots, and the BIOS. So these are some of the few components which are inside the system unit. So in this video, we are just going to talk about them briefly. Then after, we are going to upload a different video showing them physically, the way how they look like, how each of these components look like, and we see the use of each and every component. So like I've said, we are going to talk about the CPU, and in here we can say CPU is the component of the system unit which is responsible for controlling and coordinating all the tasks, all the applications that take place within the computer system. Then RAM, this is the primary memory of the computer where we save work before it is being saved to the secondary storage. So it is a component that stores work temporarily when power is on, and when power goes off, the work moves to the secondary storage. So we can also talk about the ROM. ROM is also another type of primary memory, but this one, why we call it also primary, it is because that we, the computer users, we don't interact with the ROM. All the instructions, all the work that is saved on it is saved by the manufacturer. We, the computer users, we don't interact with ROM. Next on our list is the hard disk. Hard disk is a secondary storage media or a device where we keep our information on a permanent basis. So under the secondary storage media, we can talk about a good number of them, but for today's lesson, let's only talk about the hard disk, where, like I've said, it is a device that keeps the work on a permanent basis. Next here, just I'm rushing through what is on my list here is the CMOS. CMOS is a small battery. In full form, it is the complementary metal oxide semiconductor. It is a small battery that is found on the motherboard. The use of it is to keep the computer updated whenever a computer is shut down, whenever a computer goes off. This is the component of the system unit that makes the computer not to forget the date. It makes the computer to remember the password. It makes the computer not to lose the configuration settings of it. And its use, like I've said, it is to store the configuration settings of the computer. Next is the CPU fan. This is the fan that sits on top of the system unit, like I talked about the CPU, whereby I said it is the component that controls and coordinates whatever takes place within the computer. The use of it is to cool the CPU whenever a CPU heats up. The use of it is to cool it down so that it can move on with its work. Next, we can talk about the buses. The buses, these are the pathways through which data moves to and from the storage media to the processor. These are the pathways through which data moves to and from the storage media. Like the storage media, like I talked about the hard disk. So this is the pathway through which data moves from the hard disk to the CPU, to the motherboard, and to the different components of the system unit. Next here, we can talk about the power supply. A power supply is the component of the system unit which is responsible for changing power from AC, that is the alternative current, to DC. DC means the direct current. The use of it is that it changes the power from AC to DC so that a computer can work with it well. Next here is we have the motherboard. The motherboard is it's a circuit board whereby all of these components that I've talked about are mounted. This is the component that enables or that gives the connection to all the components within or inside the system unit. Its work is to give connections to the other components within the computer. Then next is the expansion slot. An expansion slot, this is just a part of the system unit that provides connections to other external components of the computer. It provides connections to other components that can be attached to the computer externally. It does the work more like the ports, but the use of it actually, the only difference is that the ports are located on the outside part of the system unit, but whereas these expansion slots, it is inside the system unit. It is on the motherboard. So in case your computer runs, maybe in case your computer slows down and you wish to add some RAM inside your computer system, what we do is we buy the part, we buy the RAM slot, the RAM chip, and we insert it into the expansion slot of we insert into the expansion slot onto the motherboard, and the computer can improve on its speed. And lastly, here on my list is the BIOS. BIOS in full form, it is the basic input or the output system. So the use of this component is that it provides, it has some settings which are needed when the computer is starting. Whenever a computer is booting, we need this part. It's called the BIOS. It is embedded onto the motherboard, and the use of it is to provide the configuration settings or the information which is needed whenever a computer is starting. So for this lesson, I think we are going to stop here, but next we are going to also upload a video showing each and every component that is listed here.